Hey friends, what's up? So today I am going to be answering a question from Yuri Klar, talking about using React Testing Library, stumbled on this issue, and sent me to a Stack Overflow question. This is the way that you ask questions, by the way. Ask it on a public forum or something. And then you can send a link to me. You can do it on spectrum.chat or on Stack Overflow or something, and then send a link to me because it gives other people an opportunity to look at this and potentially answer it. Whereas I only have so much time in the day. I get way more questions than I have time to do dev tips and stuff like that. So if you're going to ask me a question, this is the way to do it. Yeah. So unless it's like, what toothbrush do you use? Whatever, like. It's Oral-B. Okay, so the question is, I've got this code sandbox, and actually the tests don't actually run in there, so I'm going to need to clone this. We'll clone, go to my desktop, git clone that thing, and we'll cd into React testing library with useContext. And Eric Peter says that he gets really excited when he sees a notification I'm going live. That's very nice. Thanks, Eric. Thanks for smashing that bell. Okay, cool. So, we'll just look at it in here instead of the code sandbox. I think that probably will be better off. And I did put a link to this tweet so you can find the Stack Overflow question and all of this other stuff in the description of the video. So cool. Now that we are set here, I'm going to run my alias to run the test, npm test. And that gets all the tests running. We've got 2 tests in here. One of them is passing. One of them is not. So I'm actually going to just hit the F key to run only the failing tests. And now we are off to the races. Our question asker is wondering, hey, why are these tests failing? I don't feel like they should. So the test is this menu item test. And here we're using cleanup from React Testing Library and all that stuff, which typically you'd have some in a setup test file or something. But that is working correctly. One thing, I looked at this beforehand, one thing that is not correct, Yuri, is putting jest.mock inside of a callback function will not work. Or at least it won't work the way that you think it does. So jest. And I kind of wish that jest would throw an error or something when it sees something like this. But for jest mocks to work, let's think about the code path that things are going through. We're going to import React, so we run all the React code. Then we import React Testing Library. We run all the React Testing Library code and all of the imports that React Testing Library makes, which is into React DOM. So by the time we get here, we have React DOM and everything in that. All of that code has actually run, and all those dependencies and everything have all run, been resolved. And then we import menu item. And if we go to menu item in here, then we're going to import React. That code is already run, so we just get the export. We're going to import this mobx React Lite, so it's going to run all of that code. And then we're going to import useSelectable, which is going to import these things. React code is already run, so we just grab the exports. The provider has not yet run, so we'll jump into that. The store hasn't run, so we'll jump into that. We'll, the mobx now, and so we're going to pull that in. And ultimately, then we run all of this code. So we're trying to mock out the provider. Well, if we jump into here and then in here, we've already run the provider. So you're trying to mock this module, but it's already been run. So you can't mock it later. So that's the biggest problem with mocks in general, is how do you make sure that your mock is picked up ahead of time? And the way that it works, the way that Jest makes it work, is when it compiles everything, it's going to move every call to jest mock to the very top of the file to make sure that's happened before. Now, this also doesn't work. The reason I'm getting red underlines is because imports need to be at the top. And this is just an ESLint rule to tell you to do that. And the reason, this is syntactically correct, it works. But the reason the ESLint rule exists is because while the code may appear this way, the code will actually run this way. Because imports are always hoisted. They're always run first, no matter where they appear in the file. Whoops, that is not what I wanted to do. Where I lost it. There we go. So no matter where these imports appear in the file, they can't be inside of a closure. That is a syntax error. But if they appear down here or down at the very bottom, they're always going to run first. So what happens is just like we're using Babel to compile this down to common.js, and so this changes to React from or not from, but equals require React, and then it does the same for all those other imports, and then this moves to the top, and that works. So that's how that works. So now that we understand that's how that works, you'll understand that putting a just.mock inside of a callback like this or inside of a test, which is where that's going to be running, that's not going to work the way that you think it does. So that's an important distinction to make, is that just.mock should always be at the root of your module. And yeah, so that's a useful thing to know. Cool. So yeah, so we'll take care of that first. That's not going to affect our test. That was just something that I noticed as I was looking at this, and I thought I'd mention that. Something else I just noticed is my green screen is not getting keyed out properly for some reason. I think I may need to rekey this or something, because that color must be off. Sorry about that. I'll take a look at that later. Maybe some like lights change over time or something. Okay, so yeah, let's see what's going on here. So we test should show span after clicking the category title. So we say render component, that's going to render our menu item with that category of size in this case. We expect query by text size is selected to be null, so we don't expect that to be there. Here, you know what? I'm going to actually just run should show span after clicking category tile. So we just run the one test. And you know what else? I'm just going to get rid of this app test too, because we don't need that. Just have as few things running as possible. Should show span after that. Okay, sweet. So we expected something to be null, span size is selected. So we expected that to be null, but it's actually not. Oh, that's on line 30 actually. So let's take a look at how this thing is even implemented, because I don't know what we're looking at. So mobx React Lite, we've got an observer, higher order component thing that takes props, useSelectable. useSelectable is a custom hook, I think. Yeah, that's this thing. And that'll pull the store context, and is selected determines whether or not we show it. Okay, so the is selected state except a little halo on retina displays. Oh, interesting. Okay. Let's see. So this is like, I've never used mobx before, but hopefully we can figure out what's going on. So what I'm going to do here is we'll do when we say get by size, click on that size button. So on click props category, and the category is size. Okay, so that makes sense. So we click on it, and then we have on select, and then useSelectable, that on select. Oh, there it is. Okay, so this we're using use callback, and yeah, store select category. So we've got our store. Yeah. Oh, okay. So make a new store here. Let's make sure that we're mocking the provider properly. Interesting. Okay. Well, I'm not going to dive too much further into this particular thing, because I'm actually going to recommend that we do not mock the context. Yeah, let me see here. We've got our store context. Yeah, because like we're not doing our mock is doing exactly the same thing as the provider. So it imports React, imports the store, we make a new store, we create context with that store. So the mock actually doesn't do anything for us. It just does the exact same thing. I'm just going to get rid of that mock, which itself simplifies things considerably. Okay, so in here we do onSelect. Let's open up this selectable, keep that open. The store context, we use store.selectedCategory, so we're going to need to get the store and set select category, takes the category, and it assigns the category to the given category. So this is kind of a toggle situation. So if the current category is the same as the given category, then we change the current category to null. Otherwise, we set it to the new category, which is kind of almost a toggle sort of situation. And so let's see, we render that, we click on the button, onSelect, and then we have this nice little console log, which will give us exactly what the state is. So this is the initial when we render the first time, and then this is after we click, and we get isSelected as false the first time, which is matches this assertion. And then we click on it, and then we say size is selected to be null again. I think that is a problematic test. I think the expectation is that it's not null. Based on the code here, the assertion was wrong. The assertion should say that it is selected now because I clicked on it. So hopefully that's correct. The original question was, hey, I think we're getting the context persists between tests. And yes, that is true. So to actually answer that question, let's go ahead and get this second one running, and we'll see that that is true. So we'll run all the tests, and that is happening now. If I skip this one, then the second one passes. So that is the original problem that this Yuri guy is struggling with is, hey, my tests are mucking around with each other. And this is when you know you aren't cleaning up after yourself, because, and that's probably why Yuri was trying to do a mock inside of here, is because he said, well, I mean, if we initialize the mock every single time I call render component, then we're going to have we'll have a clean store. And that's probably why Yuri wanted to try and do the mock, was to clean up the store. But that's, as I explained at the beginning, that's not how mocks work. And I kind of wish that Jest would just throw an error and say, hey, this should be at the root of the module, but it doesn't. So how do we do this? What like the core problem is you're not cleaning up after yourself, and that is a pretty common issue. I've actually got a blog post that's sort of about this test isolation in React. I gotta delete my old blog post stuff. So test isolation with React, where I kind of talk about the importance of making sure your tests are isolated because it presents these problems. I don't know whether you read this post, but he recognized this as a potential problem. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at our store here. And what I would do is I'd actually have a method on the store that is like reset or something. Typically I find that to be useful in applications anyway. But I don't often, if it's not, I don't often like adding code just for testing purposes. I'm fine with restructuring code to make it easier to test, because often it makes it easier to maintain as well. But yeah, we don't have to change the code to make it make the tests work. So what we're going to do instead is I'm going to import our store. We'll just import the store as is. Oh, actually, no, we need a store instance. So let's think about this. Okay, so here, I'll show you the really easy way to fix this problem. We're going to say before each jest.reset modules. and that'll fix it. Should have fixed it, but it didn't. That's weird. Reset modules did not fix it. That's odd. Okay, that doesn't fix it. I kind of expected that to work. So what we will do instead, this one is a little bit tricky. So the fundamental problem is we set up some state and we're not cleaning up that state. We're not resetting this. That apparently that state is global. So normally, the menu item. Hold on a second. How's this even working? Because I know how it's working. Oh, okay. I have the solution. And this is, somebody wants to add a comment to the video. This is at like around 15, almost 16 minutes. This is the solution to the problem. Fundamental problem is that our provider provides a default store if no store is provided. I think that for situations like this in particular, that's not a good idea to provide a default store or a default context value. Because normally, like if somebody's rendering a component outside of the provider, then you're going to run into problems like this. And so you want to make sure that all components are being rendered within the provider. Okay, so how do we solve this problem? We're going to import the provider. So we'll import, and actually we're export default the store context. So this is actually not the provider. This file should be changed. I'm going to rework a couple of things, but we'll work with what we have right now, and then I'll show you the reworking. So we're going to import store context from provider, and then we're going to render the store context around our menu item category. So this is how you, like, the title of the video is how do you test a thing that's using useContext. This is how you do it. You make sure that the provider, so the store context object has a provider component you can render, and then you specify a value. And so then we're going to need a value. It's going to need to be our store. So we're going to have a store that's from store. And our value is going to be a new store. And there we go. Now it's busted. Cannot read property provider of undefined because this is a named export. So this needs to be a named import. Sweet. And that fixes the problem. So why does that fix the problem? It fixes the problem because each call to this render component is rendering the menu item within a store context provider that has its own store. So they're totally separate from each other. They're not sharing any state or anything like that. That is great design. So how would I change some of this stuff? Well, first of all, I would actually make a function here called useStore that's going to return, or we're actually going to say our store equals react.useContext store context. And I'm going to say if there's not a store, then I'm going to throw a new error that says must use cannot use use store outside of a store provider. And we'll export that use store. And then we're also going to get our provider out of store context, and we'll export that as well. Whoops. So we have our provider and we have our store, and then I'm going to not export the store context. People will, if they want to use that, or if they want to use the store, they have to use this use store. And of course, this needs to return the store. Okay, so that means that instead of use selectable using the store context like this, we're going to import use store. And we'll do all of this instead. And we no longer get that. We don't need that. And then in our app, I don't know if this is actually being used in the app. Yeah, so here we're using this menu item and stuff. So before, this kind of relied on some global store that existed by default, but now we're going to rely on the fact that you have to render the provider first. So we're going to import provider from our provider, and then we'll render provider. And then this will also need to import the store from store. This will be value is new store. And then, of course, prettier is not set up in this project, so it's not auto formatting, which is a shame. But yeah, so I've got to clean up a couple other things for our test, but that's what it would look like in here. Let me make sure we're doing a default export of that store. Yep. Okay, cool. So with that, now we can go into our test, and we'll import the provider, and well, we don't need use store, we just need the provider. So we do basically what our app does. That's the fundamental concept, is that you do what the app does. And we're just going to export that provider. Now, if you didn't want to like have to, in our app, if you didn't want to have to do this store thing, then here's another thing that I think is totally legit, is instead you make a function called provider. You take props, you return store context dot provider, and spread the props, and then we're going to say the value is a new store, and then we'll import store from store, and then we'll export that provider. Okay, and the reason that this is a good idea is because it allows me as a user of the provider to override that store value really easily. So I can come in here and I'm using that provider, I'm overriding the store value. If I don't need to, if I'm fine using the store that it gives me, then I just remove that one. But every single time I render that particular provider, I'm going to get a new store. If this provider is re-rendered, I'm going to make a new store. So I'd probably not want to do this. And what I'd do is I'd say const store, or store equals react.use memo and new store. And then I'm not going to have any dependencies. So it's going to be the same store every time for the lifetime of this component. That's probably the way I would do this. And if the store needed like some configuration or something, then you'd put that in your use memo dependencies list. But yeah, in any case, that's going to fix our tests, because every time I call this render component, it's going to render my menu item within the provider. So this all comes back down to testinglibrary.com. If you go to docs, and then we're going to go to React testing library setup. So the React testing library setup recommends that first off, you set up files after env to do the cleanup after each for you, which is kind of nice. And then instead of using React testing library, you actually use your own utils. So you create a custom render that's similar to this render component function. And so the way that this is written is you import all of the stuff, so your providers and whatever else. And then you have all the providers. You have a function that has all of those providers. And then you create a custom render method similar to what this is doing. And then you re-export everything from React testing library, and then you override the render export with your custom one. And that allows you to render all of your components however you want. It doesn't matter. They'll always have the provider that they need. This is really key, that your components are rendered with an actual real provider, because that's how it's going to work in your actual app. So you want to know what your actual app is going to do. So a couple changes here that I'm going to make is render actually accepts a wrapper option, and our wrapper is this provider. And so then we can get rid of wrapping this thing with the provider, because React's testing library will do that for us. And the benefit of that is if you had a re-render here, then you could call re-render with menu item and a category of foo, and change the category, re-render it, but it would still be rendered within this provider. So you don't have to wrap this in a provider again, and so on and so forth. You just re-render that, and it'll be wrapped in your provider. That's the benefit of doing the wrapper. But in any case, having a render component, and what I'm going to do here instead, I'm going to make a function that is our custom render. And actually, well, let's do this as RTL render. And we'll just call this one render. This will take our UI and options, and we'll return return RTL render with the UI and options. Okay, so far this render doesn't do anything different from RTL render. And here's where things are going to change. I'm going to take those options and spread those, and I'm going to add my own option, which is the store. And we're going to spread those options, options. And I'm going to say wrapper is we'll take a function, our wrapper. Okay, so now we're going to return, here, we'll do things one at a time. So we've just got this options. Now we're going to return provider, and we'll take these props and we'll just spread those props. The only prop you're going to get for your wrapper is children, but we'll just do that, do it that way. Okay, so now we'll get rid of this render component, and instead we'll say render menu item, where the category is size. And we can just use it like that, like we kind of want to. We just want to render the component we care about. And we don't care about the fact that render actually wraps everything in the provider. It just kind of happens. We'll do the same thing for this one. And let's get rid of this thing. And cool, tests are still passing. So then what if I wanted to configure the store in some way, or maybe provide my own instance of the store? That's where this options comes in really handy. Is I'm going to just take those options, we'll take a store off of that, and we'll make a default store. So we'll say, and actually this needs to be a default object as well. But we'll import store from store, and we'll say new store. And then we'll say our value is that store. Okay, cool. So the benefit of that is that now we can configure our own store. So I can say render with a store that is my new store, and I can configure it however I want. I want it like whatever I want to do there. I have all of the power. The tests are still passing here. But I get to choose how things are operating because I specify my own options. So then like you do this for all of your providers. You take this render method, you put it into a special file, and then you can actually configure your test utils file so that it almost looks like a node module. Or you could just publish it to npm, but you don't have to do that. You can put it in some special directory, like a utils folder, or I put it in a test folder. But in any case, you make it so that's accessible anywhere, and then yeah, you just magic happens and it's awesome. And instead of importing from React Testing Library, you import from test utils. And yes, Nair Donnie just noticed I missed a P. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. This is like a really fundamental, important concept in any application of any significant size. I'm going to create a custom render method, and I'm going to follow these instructions for setup. You don't have to do this, like it's fine, but it works better if you do, particularly this custom render thing. Okay, cool. So that is the dev tip of the day. Question from Nair is, are there any performance issues using every provider of the app for every test? No more than there would be for like your regular app. So if rendering your component one time takes 1 second because your providers are doing some weird stuff, then your app has some very serious performance problems that should be fixed. If it takes 5 milliseconds, then you do that, 100 times, that's 5 seconds. I think it's worth it for the confidence that you get. So if you have 1,000 tests, that's going to take 50 seconds. And that I'm fine with that. I feel a lot more confidence knowing that my components are just rendered inside the providers that they need. So yeah, I've never experienced a performance problem in my tests that wasn't also a problem in my application. And in the instances where like there was a bit of a performance problem, I was getting, or where there could have been a better way to do it if I'd mocked or something, I was getting enough value out of my tests from a confidence perspective that I was fine with that. So yeah, all right, that is it for today. I hope that's helpful, and I will see you all another time. Have a wonderful day. And yeah, I might do coding with Kent today, but I've got a lot of things going on. So I will probably do my 3 minutes with Kent thing here in just a sec. And yeah, have a nice day. Goodbye. JK, I just got a question from Green Pulp. So would you stack 3 helper renders? For example, what would you do when you use context for Redux and React Router? So in the setup demo, we are doing it like this. So we just do all the providers that you use in your app. So if you have 6 providers in your app, you just put them all right there. The super great benefit of this is that with this custom render, you just import your stuff from test utils, you import the render, and it has all the providers that you need. And it also takes options for, like, maybe we should change this to show how to accept different options for these providers. So you can specify what theme you want, or if you don't care about the theme provider for this test, then you just don't specify a theme and you go with the default, and that's fine. But yeah, stack these as much as you want inside of this all providers function wrapper thing, and then put that as the wrapper. It works great. Okay, cool. I will see you later for real this time. Goodbye.